Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about one of the most complex and intense rivalries in modern history, Israel and Iran. This story has everything: covert alliances, dramatic revolutions, secret operations, proxy wars, and global power plays. If you've ever wondered how two nations that once quietly cooperated are now trading missile threats and drone strikes, you're in for a ride. And don't worry, this won't be a dry history lesson. We're keeping things immersive, human, and focused on the bigger picture, including how this conflict affects ordinary people and the rest of the world. Let's rewind the clock and go all the way back. What if I told you that Israel and Iran were once, believe it or not, allies? Not just neutral, but actually working together. Hard to imagine now, right? But that's exactly what was happening from the early 1950s through the late 1970s. Iran, at the time, was under the rule of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, a pro-Western monarch who came to power after a CIA-backed coup in 1953. Israel, a young state founded in 1948, was surrounded by hostile Arab neighbors and constantly on the lookout for regional allies. It turns out Iran fit that role surprisingly well. The two countries weren't publicly shaking hands or hosting joint press conferences, but behind the scenes, they were working together in some very significant ways. Iran sold oil to Israel, which was crucial given the Arab boycott. Israel, in return, helped Iran with military technology, intelligence training, and even construction projects. The two also had shared interests in curbing the spread of Arab nationalism, particularly the rising influence of Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. Both feared what a unified and radical Arab world might mean for their own national security. And of course, both were closely tied to the United States, making them unofficial partners in a US-backed regional balance of power. One of the most intriguing examples of their cooperation was something called Project Flower, a secret weapons deal where Israel helped Iran develop advanced missile systems. Imagine that! Israel helping Iran build missiles, decades before those same types of weapons would become a core issue in their bitter rivalry. But back then, it wasn't controversial because both sides saw benefits in working together. There was a level of trust, even if it was kept quiet. At one point, Israeli experts were even working inside Iran, training Iranian intelligence officers and helping improve military infrastructure. On paper, the two countries were still officially at odds, but in reality, they were growing closer. It's almost surreal to think about today, given how deep the hostility runs now. But this hidden friendship was very real. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't public. But it was practical. And for about 2 decades, it seemed like it might actually last. Then everything changed in 1979. That's when the Iranian Revolution erupted and turned the entire equation upside down. The Shah was overthrown by a massive wave of political, social, and religious upheaval. In his place came Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a radical cleric who had spent years in exile railing against Western influence and what he called moral corruption. He didn't just want to change the government, he wanted to transform Iranian society from the ground up. That meant rejecting everything the Shah stood for, including his ties with the West. And that definitely included Israel. Khomeini's new Islamic Republic didn't just break diplomatic relations with Israel, it turned Israel into an ideological enemy. The regime labeled Israel the Zionist regime and portrayed it as an extension of Western imperialism. In one dramatic move, they handed over the Israeli embassy in Tehran to the Palestine Liberation Organization. They changed the street name outside the former embassy to Palestine Street. The symbolism was clear. Iran had picked a side, and it wasn't Israel's. This ideological shift wasn't just about rhetoric. It became policy. Iran started actively supporting groups that were hostile to Israel. The most significant was Hezbollah, a militant Shiite organization that took root in Lebanon during the chaos of that country's civil war. Hezbollah received funding, weapons, and training from Iran, and quickly became one of the most powerful non-state military forces in the region. Iran's goal was clear. If it couldn't attack Israel directly, it would support others who could. And so began what many analysts now call the Shadow War, a long-running, covert, and often deadly conflict carried out through proxies, espionage, and cyber attacks. For Iran, the idea was to bleed Israel slowly through attrition, using allies like Hezbollah in the north and later Hamas in Gaza. For Israel, the challenge was to keep those threats at bay while preventing Iran from gaining a direct military foothold in nearby countries like Syria. At first, this shadow war operated mostly in the background. Hezbollah would attack Israeli forces or launch cross-border raids. Israel would respond with targeted airstrikes or raids into southern Lebanon. But over time, the conflict grew in scope and sophistication. Iranian advisors were showing up on the ground in Syria, helping the Assad regime and building military infrastructure near the Israeli border. Israel responded with dozens, perhaps hundreds, of airstrikes targeting Iranian assets inside Syria. Each side denied some of the operations, but the message was clear. The war was real, even if it wasn't officially declared. One of the most dangerous dimensions of the conflict was the issue of nuclear weapons. Iran insists that its nuclear program is peaceful and focused on generating energy and producing medical isotopes. But Israel, and many others in the international community, aren't buying it. They fear that Iran's uranium enrichment and ballistic missile development are steps toward building a nuclear bomb. And for Israel, a nuclear-armed Iran isn't just a problem, it's an existential threat. So, Israel took matters into its own hands. In 2010, a computer virus called Stuxnet was discovered. It was no ordinary malware. This one had a very specific target: Iran's nuclear centrifuges. The virus is widely believed to have been developed by Israel and the United States in a top-secret cyber operation. It set back Iran's nuclear program by several years by causing the centrifuges to malfunction and destroy themselves. It was a stunning display of how modern warfare had evolved, less about tanks and more about keyboards. But that wasn't all. In the years that followed, several Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in mysterious circumstances. Bombs planted on cars, motorcycle drive-bys, silent snipers. No group claimed responsibility, but the Iranian government pointed the finger at Israel, and most experts agree that Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, was likely involved. Then came the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, known officially as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA. Under the agreement, Iran agreed to scale back its nuclear program, reduce its uranium stockpile, and allow international inspections. In exchange, crippling economic sanctions would be lifted. The deal was championed by the Obama administration and seen by many as a major diplomatic breakthrough. But Israel was deeply opposed. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went so far as to address the U.S. Congress directly, warning that the deal would not stop Iran from eventually acquiring a bomb. He called it a historic mistake and accused Iran of lying about its intentions. Then, in 2018, President Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the deal, arguing that it was too weak and gave Iran too much leeway. Sanctions were reimposed, and Iran began ramping up its uranium enrichment again. The delicate balance that the deal had created started to unravel. Tensions spiked once more. Around the same time, a new dynamic was reshaping the region. Israel began to normalize relations with several Arab states, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Morocco. These agreements, known as the Abraham Accords, marked a significant diplomatic shift. For decades, Arab nations had refused to recognize Israel until the Palestinian issue was resolved. But now, shared concerns about Iran's regional power were pushing old rivals together. Suddenly, Israel wasn't as isolated in the Middle East as it once was. Iran, meanwhile, saw these new alliances as yet another threat, and a sign that Israel was building a regional coalition against it. As these regional dynamics shifted, Iran doubled down on its strategy of building what it calls the axis of resistance. This included Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, the Houthi rebels in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq, and increasingly, a significant military presence in Syria. Each of these groups serves a strategic purpose for Iran: projecting power, pressuring Israel, and undermining American and Israeli influence in the region. For Israel, this network represents an encirclement strategy by Iran. It's not just about missiles from Iran itself. It's about rockets from Lebanon, drones from Syria, gunmen from Gaza, and instability in Iraq and the Red Sea. Iran's goal is to tie down Israel in multiple arenas, stretching its defenses and creating perpetual tension. And Israel has responded accordingly, with a mixture of preemptive strikes, cyber sabotage, intelligence operations, and increasingly public coordination with Arab neighbors and global powers. This is where the conflict starts to resemble less of a Cold War and more of a hybrid war, part conventional, part proxy, part digital, and all very real. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting weapons shipments, Iranian bases, and militant leaders. Meanwhile, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq have launched rockets at U.S. and Israeli-linked targets. The Houthis in Yemen have attacked ships in the Red Sea, sometimes with missiles that threaten Israeli interests. And on the cyber front, both countries have suffered and delivered digital blows, from hacking water systems and hospitals to crashing servers and leaking state secrets. And all this while the people in both countries, Israelis and Iranians, go about their daily lives under a cloud of uncertainty. In Israel, civilians rush to bomb shelters when sirens go off. In Iran, people face economic hardship from years of sanctions, made worse by military spending and regional adventurism. Both nations invest heavily in defense. Both live with the knowledge that a single miscalculation could lead to open war. Now, let's talk about the broader international arena, because this isn't just a regional rivalry. It's a geopolitical flashpoint involving some of the most powerful players on Earth. On one side, you have Israel, backed by the United States, which provides over $3 billion a year in military aid. American support goes beyond money. It includes intelligence cooperation, weapons technology, joint exercises, and diplomatic protection. The U.S. often uses its veto power in the United Nations to shield Israel from resolutions it deems unfair. Beyond America, Israel has cultivated strong ties with European countries and now with Arab states that are themselves threatened by Iran's ambitions. On the other side, Iran has increasingly aligned itself with powers like Russia and China. These countries provide economic lifelines in the face of Western sanctions and offer diplomatic backing in international forums. Russia and Iran have cooperated closely in Syria, where both supported the Assad regime. China, meanwhile, signed a massive 25-year cooperation agreement with Iran covering energy, infrastructure, and military coordination. While these alliances are not as deep or ideological as Western ones, they serve Iran's strategic need to resist isolation and build alternatives to the Western-led global order. This growing alignment between Israel and Sunni Arab states and between Iran and rival powers has essentially divided the Middle East into two competing blocs. And while this isn't a new Cold War in the classic sense, it's certainly cold enough. The threats, the mistrust, the arms buildup, it all adds up to a tense, unpredictable standoff. And sometimes, the standoff spills into full-blown confrontation. Take, for instance, the recurring wars in Gaza. Every few years, fighting erupts between Israel and Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad. While these groups are based in Gaza, their funding, training, and ideology are closely linked to Tehran. Iran publicly supports them as part of the broader resistance to Israel. During conflicts, Iran celebrates rocket barrages on Israeli cities. And while it denies direct involvement, few doubt that Iran plays a major role in keeping these groups armed and operational. In response, Israel launches massive air campaigns targeting militant infrastructure, leadership figures, and weapons stockpiles. These battles are often brief but intense, and they leave civilians, on both sides, dead or traumatized. Homes are destroyed, schools are damaged. Children grow up with the sounds of drones, sirens, and explosions as background noise. And beyond the rockets and bombs, there's a propaganda war raging in the media and online. Iran portrays Israel as an aggressor, an occupying force, and a symbol of Western hypocrisy. Israel, in turn, casts Iran as a radical, expansionist regime bent on destroying the Jewish state. Both use media, social platforms, and international outlets to tell their side of the story. And the truth often gets lost in the noise. Meanwhile, attempts at diplomacy remain fragile. The JCPOA nuclear deal was supposed to be a path toward de-escalation. But after the U.S. withdrawal and Iran's enrichment activities, trust has eroded. Negotiations continue sporadically, but mutual suspicion is deep. Israel insists it will never allow Iran to get a nuclear bomb. Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful. Neither side believes the other. The risk of war, whether by design or accident, looms large. Let's zoom in for a moment on the nuclear question, because it really is central to this whole story.
From Israel's perspective, a nuclear Iran would change everything. Israel is a small country, densely populated, geographically narrow, and surrounded by hostile actors. Even the threat of a nuclear weapon in Iranian hands could deter Israeli military operations, embolden Iran's proxies, and destabilize Israel's strategic calculus. That's why Israel has taken such aggressive steps to stop the program, from Stuxnet to sabotage to targeted assassinations. For Israeli leaders, this isn't just policy, it's survival. For Iran, though, the nuclear program is about more than energy. It's about sovereignty, deterrence, and pride. Iran sees itself as a major regional power, rich in history, culture, and resources. It believes it has the right to nuclear technology, just like other nations. And it views Western efforts to shut down its program as hypocritical, especially when Israel itself is widely believed to have nuclear weapons, even though it has never officially confirmed it. So both sides dig in. Israel insists on military options being on the table. Iran enriches more uranium, talks break down. Diplomats try to patch things together. And all the while, ordinary people wonder what tomorrow will bring. Which brings us to a more human question. How do the people feel? Here's the surprising part. Despite decades of hostility between their governments, many Iranians and Israelis express curiosity, sympathy, and even admiration for one another. Social media has opened up channels that were previously unimaginable. There are Instagram pages where young Iranians and Israelis talk, share stories, swap memes, and support peace. Underground artists in Tehran paint graffiti calling for unity. Israeli students study Persian poetry. Iranian dissidents praise Israeli democracy. For some, it's a quiet rebellion against the politics of hate. But these voices are often drowned out by war drums. When conflict flares up, when a general is assassinated or a nuclear site is hit, both countries retreat into their corners. Nationalism rises. Fear spreads. Leaders rally support by pointing to the enemy. It becomes harder to talk about peace, harder to imagine coexistence. And yet, the alternative is grim. An open war between Israel and Iran would be catastrophic, not just for the two nations involved, but for the region and the world. Oil prices would soar, global markets would tremble, refugees would flood neighboring countries. Extremist groups would exploit the chaos, and the dream of peace would be set back decades. So where does that leave us? Some experts believe that deterrence will hold, that both sides know a full-scale war is too costly and will continue to fight in the shadows instead. Others worry that one misstep, a drone shoot-down, an airstrike gone wrong, a political miscalculation, could light the fuse. And with nuclear tensions rising, the stakes have never been higher. But here's a thought to end on. History is full of rivalries that once seemed permanent. America and Vietnam, France and Germany, even the Cold War between the US and the Soviet Union. And yet, over time, enemies can become partners. Dialogue replaces bombs. Trade replaces sanctions. Young people grow up with different dreams than their parents. Maybe one day that could happen here too. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. But if enough people on both sides believe in a different future, if they choose peace over fear, connection over propaganda, then maybe, just maybe, this rivalry doesn't have to define the future. Thanks for staying with me through this deep dive. If you learned something today, or if this changed how you think about the Israel-Iran story, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Do you think peace is possible? Or are we headed for more confrontation? Either way, stay curious, stay informed, and stay kind. Peace.